Jensen, did you open that waste container? You might have contaminated the whole building. Or is something wrong with you?
Not all ideas need to be super complex to work extremely well. In fact, sometimes some of the best ideas are very simple at their core. One such case is the creation of the Superman villain Parasite.
Created by Jim Shooter for DC Comics at age 14.
The Parasite has gone on to survive the test of time, growing, evolving, making it through crisis after crisis, being adapted across mediums. And yet at the core, the original concept from 1966 holds strong, because it was such a simple yet solid base for a Superman villain. So we're gonna go back and take a look at the first two appearances by the Parasite as written by Shooter, because then you also get to see the character evolve when handled by the same writer over the course of a couple of years. It's also fascinating to look at because he was so young at the time. I'm Sasha, this is Casually Comics, and let's do it. Yes, I have thumb holes today. Parasite, or The Parasite, debuted in Action Comics 340 in 1966. It was written by Jim Shooter with art by Al Pastino. The editor was Mort Weisinger, who was the first to buy one of Shooter's scripts, and the first to learn his actual age. Shooter recalls, yes, I have quotes, early. People have occasionally said Mort really plotted everything. No, my instructions on Supergirl were Supergirl, 12 pages. Most of them were like that, and I'm not saying we never had story conferences. I sent him the Supergirl and he liked it, and said send me a Superman, 22 pages. And I sent him the origin of the Parasite, and then I was back on Legion again. When he told me he wanted to do Legion regularly, that was the phone call. I lived in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and all of this was over the phone. And he said, I want you to come up to New York and spend a couple of days in the office. And I said, okay, but I was hesitating. He said, how old are you? And I said, well, sir, I just turned 14. I believe he thought I was a college student, so the business trip had to wait until school let out, and I had to take my mother with me. It's really embarrassing to have to take your mother on a business trip. I'm so glad that my kids are young and they're not the we're embarrassed by you mom stage yet. Not looking forward to it. Fingers crossed it doesn't happen, but it probably will because mom makes YouTube videos. Shooter also goes on about how Weisinger was also a very abusive editor, but it was something he says that he got used to. Even though you're only 14, I'm gonna treat you like I treat every other writer. What I didn't know is that the way he treated every other writer was to be abusive, and he was to me. He'd go over it panel by panel, word by word, page by page. He would start spewing, you idiot. He was just screaming at me about what a moron I was and how stupid I was every time he saw a spelling error or any kind of mistake. His line then was, no, I'll give you one more chance. I know your family would starve without you, because Shooter was working to earn extra money for his family. You're my charity case. It got to the point where if I was anywhere and heard a phone ring, I'd get white-knuckled. I would be at school, and if a phone rang within an earshot, I would freeze up. It was horrible, and it wasn't just with me. He'd do that with everybody. It took a couple of years, and I started thinking, you know what? If I really sucked, they wouldn't keep sending me checks. So as mentioned, the script for The Parasite was one of the earlier ones that he sent in. And there is a marked difference between it and the second Parasite story just a couple of years later. So let's take a look at the first introduction of the Parasite. Come on, Superman, fight back. The more energy you use, the faster I can drain your strength into my body. Presenting the most dangerous villain Superman has ever faced in the power of the Parasite. He feeds on living energy. This cover told me the truth. I feel like it's failing at something in the Silver Age department because of it. Introducing the most powerful foe Superman has ever faced. This time the Man of Steel battles a human parasite who feeds on living energy. Like a vampire sucks blood, and not even Superman is mighty enough to resist the strength-sapping power of the Parasite. Like many things that occurred in the Silver Age, the Parasite is tangentially Superman's fault, though not really. It's really the result of poor office safety and bad protocols surrounding waste disposal. Superman has brought back a highly dangerous radioactive substance from space, and he's been studying his latest atomic project at a government lab. When he leaves, he tells the scientists to dispose of the waste. He's already sealed it up and all that. They just need to throw it out. They have one job. This is because he says it's too dangerous to be handled by regular humans. Why leave it there then? Don't trust people. Stop giving serums to Jimmy. The scientists send Maxwell Jensen to do this, who it's not really specified what he does. They treat him like a janitor or intern, but it's not clear what his job actually is. The point is that they treat him as someone that they view as beneath them. I was fired from 3 jobs last year. Can't afford to say. This thing is heavy. I wonder what's in it. It says radioactive waste. Maybe. But I heard they used to ship payrolls like this to fool crooks. I'll peek inside. If it's radioactive, I'll shut it quick. Ah, the lock's giving. Wow, Superman really locked that super tight, didn't he? Put minimal effort in. He was far too trusting. He should have at least left a note. Please don't open this. It really is radioactive waste. There's nothing cool in here. I can't promise you that the powers you get will be good. As the larcenous laborer opens the container, he is bathed in strange alien rays which penetrate to every cell of his body. Larcenous, now there's a word you don't hear every day. This accident is of course what turns him into the Parasite, but we need one more reminder of how awful his workmates were. Suddenly, one of the lab's top scientists comes upon the limp figure.
Jensen, did you open that waste container? You might have contaminated the whole building. Or Is something wrong with you?
Jensen, stop dying on the floor and take the waste out. We're not paying you to die. That's on the 4th and 13th floor. Now the parasite has a very simple design. He is a purple, slightly lumpy monster man, but there are elements that even here are eerie. How he's lost most of the portions of his face to the blast, the sunken eyes and covered mouth that's barely there and almost seems gunked up. It's like it's melded together, like he's welded, or everything is too tight and he's melting a bit. Just blah, blah, blah. And it has been shown that when this design has been revisited, you can make this original design version range from silly to unnerving to downright terrifying. It just depends how you render it. Jensen very quickly realizes that he now must feed off the energy of others. And when he does, not only does he get their strength/energy, but also their intelligence. This transfer of brain power allows him to figure his situation out. Definitely much quicker than he would have on his own. Soon at Jensen's dingy rooming house. Dingy. With the mentality I stole from these men, I figured out this parasite power. The radiation did more than scar my face and body. It turned me into an atomic furnace. In minutes, I burn up all the energy a normal body has, but I can replenish it. By becoming a human parasite and draining it from others, I can live indefinitely. Becoming super strong by sapping the strength of a whole crowd. I can be the world's mightiest criminal, but when people learn to avoid me, and I can't recharge my power, I'll be doomed. First thoughts are life of crime. Are you sure you shouldn't move to Gotham, Jensen? His plans are modified when Superman flies by his window. And even from a distance, he's able to siphon off some of that energy, and he feels just how tremendous it is. He figures with power like that, he can be charged forever. So he goes to the site where Superman is helping to build a hospital, which he learns about through the newspaper. Superman has changed into Clark at this point, but like a beacon, the parasite is drawn to his energy. Also, I love that it's just a trench coat and a hat, which is very base, simple disguise for him. Because he's able to lock onto this energy source and pull this energy, he's also able to determine that Clark Kent is Superman. Good job, Jensen. Shame on you, Lois. It took Jensen 5 minutes, though in all fairness, Superman hasn't consistently been gaslighting him for years like he has with Silver Age Lois. But even so, still, Lois.
I'm fine, Lois. Leave me alone. I must find out what's causing my weakness.
Clark, wait! I'm sorry. Yeah, Lois, how dare you ask if he's okay? The parasite now feels he has an edge over Superman because now when he confronts him, he has leverage. So no time like the present to rob a bank, why not? It's early in the day. I'm the parasite. You'll remember that name, Superman, because when I finish stealing your power, you won't live long enough to forget. I'm glad I thought of this costume. It makes me look more fearsome.
Rip? Fearsome is not the word I would use.
I guess since he's robbing a bank, he feels he can just shred his clothes. He'll be able to afford more. What follows for the rest of the story is a pretty epic battle between Parasite and Superman. He's not able to use his plan to out Superman's secret identity because he drains all the people around them into unconsciousness. And we just get to see Superman slowly get beaten down, like how haggard he looks in this panel. And as the battle goes on, it's revealed that the parasite has also begun to absorb his abilities, specific ones like heat vision. We get to see Superman's internal thoughts as he's determined to keep fighting even though he's losing, just grasping for different strategies against a foe who has robbed him of his usual consistent advantage. Also, there's a fun game you can play this for yourself, and that's to see if Plastino remembers to put the lines up the parasite's chest, because sometimes they're there and sometimes they're not. That last punch was all I needed. Now as your final bit of power leaves you and death is closing in on you, I'll amuse you by telling you my plans. Jensen, listen, if you want to monologue at people, just get a TikTok or a YouTube or a podcast or first, I'll get revenge on the people who ordered me around. Then I'll rob Fort Knox and the Bank of England. And not being from Krypton, I don't have your weakness to kryptonite. I only absorb your raw power. I'm invincible. It's all going great for Parasite until it suddenly isn't, and he just explodes. It's very abrupt and anticlimactic. It's just in the last 4 panels, it's like, oh, and he exploded. Now, the explanation is that he sapped up too much power. He got greedy. He was the Icarus of parasites. Because even though he was a parasite, his body was still mortal. That's how Superman puts it. Not human, mortal. And it couldn't handle all that energy. So okay, pretty solid start. Fun adventure, but with some flaws. The concept of the parasite is great. It tackles the Superman strength problem head on. And it does it in a creative way that doesn't involve kryptonite. You need to be strong to fight Superman, and this does that in a creative way. With the parasite, you get someone who can siphon off energy. He's a danger not just to the people around him, but to the Man of Steel. As he gets stronger, Superman gets weaker. It creates an interesting dynamic with stakes, and it forces Superman to have to be clever. Until the very end of that when he doesn't. But in later stories, he has to be more clever. Because in this, Superman's just hedging his bets. Like, it's probably too much energy, right?
I hope so.
Radiation accident gone wrong. He even gets an extra edge by finding out Superman's identity, positioning him as a real threat on more than just a physical level. However, there are some looser ends. What does Jensen do at the company? Something. Just an added detail of him being a janitor and feeling resentful about how he's being treated by the others would go a long way. And it does, because they introduce that element later on in the post-crisis version. How much can he control his powers? It's not quite clear. Because if he can suck the energy from Superman as he flies by out the window passively, he's not even really trying to do it, then what about the other people in the building? Shouldn't they just be on the ground? It's one of those things where the little details aren't quite all coalescing yet. Some of his dialogue is also a bit over the top or exposition heavy, particularly in the villain monologue section. First I'll rob this place, then I'll rob that place, and then I'll rob this place, they'll be sorry. And some of the exposition was delivered choppily. The ending, as mentioned, is also very much like, wrap it up, we gotta finish it. Not that that is entirely unique to this story from this era. It's not a bad explanation, but it could have used more setup. But there is some refinement when Shooter revisits the character just 2 years later in Action Comics 361, now in 1968. Once more, he's working with Al Plastino. This time the cover's by Neil Adams though, not Kurt Swan, who did the first one. And this cover's going pretty hard. Not as hard as Neil Adams covers will eventually go, but the bones are there. Just look at the black eyes on Superman. He's back, that fiendish freak who lives on the energy he steals from others. And with this human sponge soaking up all his super strength, even the Man of Steel can't cope with the power of the Parasite.
Boy, that's the same name as last time.
We open on Clark being told by Perry that he needs to get down to a UFO sighting, or a flying saucer sighting as they call it. But on the way, Superman spies a boat being attacked by a giant mechanical octopus being operated by a gang that he's been trying to catch. And he decides that the likelihood of it being an actual flying saucer, despite he himself being an alien, is pretty minuscule, and he wants to go fight the giant mechanical octopus. So it's mechanical octopus time. But of course that means it's a real saucer with an alien who's flying around mapping the area. As he's going around, he spies all these different clouds. One of them is a mysterious particle cloud, and he starts analyzing it and brings it on board as he sees that it was once a person. So he reconstitutes it. Why, it's human in shape but with a grotesque face. He's stepping out of the chamber. I must ask him to explain this to me. It's approaching me. I feel weak. All my energy being drawn out of me. Step back. He's dead. I stole too much of his energy. But it was his own fault for bringing me, the Parasite, back to life. You know you fully embraced your villain lifestyle when you start using the term in your own thoughts. Like, me, the Parasite. Add that determiner in your own mind. You can also see the code is loosening a tiny bit because he killed this alien. Whereas in the first story, we saw that everybody was just unconscious or passed out. Also, they probably got away with it because this is an alien, and hence you can kind of skirt around. Not cool. These panels are pretty menacing too. This poor terrified alien. After a couple of recap panels, the Parasite decides it's time to go back to messing with Superman. This time he wants to siphon his energy off slowly. It's implied that he has a bit more control over his powers now, that he doesn't have to just go in and suck everything up all at once. And also that it can be a bit more targeted as well. For example, he bumps into Jimmy Olsen specifically to siphon off some of his journalistic talent. He does the same to Lois as well, and at some point he went and got a very credible mask. They draw him with this little yellow aura around him, so you know he's constantly absorbing energy, at least in a low-grade way. Clark Kent, meet Lachlan Leach. I'm giving him a tryout as a reporter, and I want you to show him the ropes. You'll work with Clark, Leach. I'll stick with him every minute, Mr. White. Stealing his Superman powers slowly but surely. Lachlan Leach. If only I could come up with a great punny pseudonym. It's the only thing stopping me from being a Silver Age villain in disguise. Oh my gosh, also, did you notice? That's 2 L's. That's a double L. Clark, 2 L's. We all know how Superman feels about that. So Leach begins to go on assignments with Clark, and on them, of course, Clark has to slip away to do Superman things. And as he's doing this, he starts to notice that he's getting less and less capable. Things are becoming more difficult. He's not as strong. Things are taking longer. And he also just has no idea why. Could there be kryptonite nearby that might have weakened me? But there's no sense in worrying about it. I'll switch back to Clark and rejoin Leach. It shouldn't have taken so long. I must be borrowing strength too fast. I'd better slow down or he'll get suspicious. Superman even gets bruised the next time when he's fighting a robot. Kent looks worried. He knows he's losing energy. Soon he'll begin searching for the reason. I still haven't absorbed enough of his power to battle him safely. I'll have to keep him busy for a while. And I know just how to do it. I'll use the power I've already absorbed to create emergencies only he can handle. I'll find a good one with my stolen telescopic vision. Because by this point, he's already started to gain control of some of Clark's abilities, so he's able to use the freeze breath, the heat vision, and just curate these little disasters to keep Superman busy. This story doesn't focus on Clark's perspective, but this must be absolutely terrifying for him. This would be a fun one to have one of those switches where they have the person write it again, but then you see it from another character and it's just Clark panicking the entire time. But now finally, Leach feels like he's ready. The time is now. And so next day, his deadly plan almost complete, the Parasite lies in wait for Clark Kent. Psst, Clark, come here. I have something to show you.
What is it, Leach?
Just join me in this back alley, it's fine. Come on, my name's got 2 L's. Legit L's too, not like Lex. We see you, Alexander.
The parasite!
Yes, fool, and now your heat vision will burn off your outer garments. Prepare for the beating of your life, super sap. It's so petty. It was me, Barry levels of petty. I love it. The parasite gets pretty hardcore here too. He gets into some monstrous territory. And how he's drawn here, it's also, again, a little scary. Ever had a black eye before, Soupy? There's a first time for everything. I'll give you 2, then I'll bust your nose. Well, actually, the robot from the last encounter a while back beat you to it, but the sentiment stands. But Parasite is stopped this time by something unexpected, and this time it's aliens, members of the alien race from the cartographer he killed. They needed that map. Also, murder is wrong. And it turns out that Superman had gotten in touch with them a few days prior and they had hatched a plan. Boo! His. So Superman lets the aliens extradite him, and that's all the parasite there is, like an official parasite appearance until the 70s under Elliot S. Magnum, where he comes back. Okay, so second story. The parasite is refined slightly here, and the refinements do help. It also shows that the character can be versatile, taking abilities from others, playing the long game. It shores up some of the gaps from his powers in the first one, though it doesn't explicitly state it, but it's more clear how his powers are working, and it feels like he's improved from the first story to the second story, both Shooter as a writer and the parasite as a character. It still has a rushed conclusion. It is good that it goes for something different from the first story, but that added element of Superman being in on it didn't need to be there. It's fine that he was, but this definitely could have been one of those stories where it's all happening around Superman and he's just wondering what's happening. That'll teach you for blowing off a flying saucer for a mechanical octopus. Now from there on in, the seeds were sown, and the parasite throughout the tail end of the Silver Age and the rest of the Bronze Age would find himself used sparingly by different writers. He didn't develop much of an inner life, but he remained consistent. He was also a varied, incredible threat to Superman, quickly rising to become considered one of his most dangerous foes. Now the second parasite, the Rudy Jones version, tends to be better remembered because that's the name of the one that gets adapted. Most of the time. Not all. Supergirl went for both, first appearing in Superman TAS in the 90s.
Good evening, dinner. Enjoy your night out? You better believe it.
Though that version has Jensen's character design, which the character didn't have when they debuted Post-Crisis on Infinite Earths. That Post-Crisis version also basically had the same origin as Jensen, and it was orchestrated on purpose.
In the comics, at least. It was modified sometimes for adaptation, including TAS.
He was a janitor working at Star Labs who Darkseid manipulated into opening a toxic waste canister because he wanted to recreate Parasite for that universe, as he still remembered the original Parasite from before Crisis on Infinite Earths. But in this iteration, he was green for a bit, though. It doesn't have the same menace. It's just not as much of a look as the purple.
They eventually change it later. They attempt to cure him and it turns him purple.
And when they revise his origin, they go back to it. They also play around with some more monstrous designs as time goes on. Especially around the mouth or head area, you get some gaping maws going on. Most of the later versions don't veer away too far in terms of how the parasites come to be, mostly because they don't have to. It's a very solid foundation. The New 52 one tweaks it the most, with Joshua Allen catching an alien flu and then going to Star Labs and there's an explosion and then he becomes the parasite. Because the New 52 felt that everything had to be built different, even if the things from before still worked. It can't be the New 52 if things are old. But even when you tweak the how, the core remains. And sometimes the tweaks just showcase that you really don't need to get too fancy with it to work. The parasite has a very nice, simple flow for a Superman villain that complements the Man of Steel well. But he can also work elsewhere for other characters. It's a strong base that you can add abilities or weaknesses, like eventually making him weak to kryptonite when he steals from Superman, or characteristics to. He's a scary, solid concept. And a testament to the idea that sometimes it's best to just keep it simple. And all of this because Shooter's 9th grade biology class was studying parasitic organisms. So those were the Parasite's first 2 appearances. What do you think? Do you think the Parasite is a good villain? Meh. Not interesting? Do you have a favorite version or story? Share your thoughts down below. I just wanted to chat about villain origins again. It's been too long. And I want to talk to you in the comments. So while you're down there, please do all the YouTube things. Like, share, subscribe, hit the bell notification so that you never miss a vid. Thanks so much for taking some time out of your day to spend it discussing comics with me. I always appreciate it. I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.